It might not be specifically the puzzles, unless the puzzles, here's the thing, unless the puzzles were specific to the writings that were in them.
How do you get rid of a shape changer? How do you deal with this monster even though everyone in town thinks they're you? You can't just outright kill them because they'll be like, oh, they'll become hostile.
100 gold, if I need to hire some construction folks and get some materials together and, utilize it, that's going to take me pretty far. I can fix up a lot of this.
Yeah, I think the quest would then take you on how do you find the Masons Guild and how do you hire them out.
Alex, how are you feeling this week?
I'm alive and I'm kicking, and that's all that matters.
That's good. Did you miss me the last couple weeks?
I didn't even notice you were gone, except for the fact we hadn't recorded a show in quite a while.
Yeah, well, I was gone for a little bit, but I am back now, and we can record. Aren't you excited?
I am so excited. Can you tell by my eyes?
Oh, man, your eyes speak volumes right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex.
And we are officially back.
Woo.
And front. Also front. Alex...
In front and center.
Yes. Okay, Alex, I wanted to start with something that I didn't really want to talk about, but I need to, so we're going to do it. I saw this thing come up on my feed. I think I was, scanning through Twitter, and it just made me start going, ah! I think I made that exact sound, just in case you were wondering.
Good. I mean, Twitter often makes that sound, so...
Yes. Almost every single time that I'm on Twitter, my first thing that I do is scream into the void. There was some talk going around about the newest game from Cyan.
It's not Abduction, is it?
No, actually,
they have a new one?
They do. They do. This is Firmament. Okay,
no, I did hear that title somewhere.
Right. Comes from Cyan. Cyan always very well known for Myst and Riven and, all of those games that came out, very classic puzzle games. When people were playing this, they had a very negative experience. It seemed to be fairly negative response back because of some things like, the puzzles. I think that they cite here, fans let down by some of the puzzle designs, also repeatedly mention how flat the game's world feels, how poor the narration is, and the sparsity of Firmament's in-game lore, which really stand out compared to Cyan's 90s blockbusters. Well, we know why, because when they ran the credits at the end, somebody, specifically actually Luke Plunkett over at Kotaku, made note of this. It's because of the nice little thank you that they give to all the AI-assisted content they put in. In fact, as the article reads, and they have the screenshot, which I'm going to throw up on the screen right now if you're watching the video, AI-assisted content. Which includes, as it says here, journals, logs, checklists, newspapers, stories, songs, poems, letters, loosely scattered papers, all backer portraits, all founder portraits, the sunset paintings, the Art Nouveau wallpaper in the Swan dormitory hallways, propaganda banners, coastal spill decal kit, all voiced mentor, announcer, founder, and other speeches, backer exclusive content. That's what's listed under AI-assisted content for the game.
It feels like a lot.
It is. So, as you can tell, this was not something people were happy to hear about. One of the things that people were very concerned about was the idea that, does this mean that there were voice actors that were, just basically having their stuff used? Luke Plunkett apparently reached out to Cyan, and Cyan did give a response, and I'll tell you what the response is for the clarity of this, before I continue. AI-assisted content listed in credits for Firmament is, well, exactly that. It is content of which its final state you see it as in the game, as was assisted. Not wholly created, but services built on what many refer to as AI that Cyan staff made use of. For example, all voice acting content was performed by an actual human being, 100% of the time, which may have been obvious already if you have listened to it, especially considering the performance, cadence, and content. But the final performance timbre, pitch, and tone was modified with one of those services with the performer's consent. Hopefully that clarifies things more and provides a good example of what we mean by AI-assisted content. So what I then had to rush off with my Twitter fingers to say was, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a version of Myst that was all AI generated and it was just like 200 random things that you looked at because the algorithm decided they reminded him of age? Like, the word age just reminded him of all this. Just 100 clocks. Just like all around you.
I guess, were the puzzles assisted with the AI? I don't remember if you had said that, sorry.
The puzzles themselves, no.
Okay.
The puzzles themselves, no. But just like journals, newspapers, poems, letters, the paintings, the banners, like all the stuff in the game world. It might not be specifically the puzzles, unless the puzzles, here's the thing, unless the puzzles were specific to the writings that were in them.
So this leads to the idea that AI can be a useful tool, but relying on AI to make the deep lore and intricate, interesting parts of it is probably not a smart idea, because AI is soulless.
Right, quite literally. It has no resonance to it. It can't produce art. It can only emulate what it's seen that is art.
Right. And we did talk about this a little before in a different episode,
yes,
that like AI can generate these story beats,
sure,
and for instance journal entries, but it cannot forward think.
Right. It can
based on what
it's
doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you can have a journal here, but this journal here is not going to inform the next journal entry that it would make. So,
right.
Like, unless they're specifically feeding in parts, like typing in a prompt here and coming up with the one that they like and then taking it, like, either these journal entries are useless.
Yeah.
And just there for flavor, and just maybe they have it write most of it and then they edit it themselves. I don't really know.
Right.
But like if people are, why, I'm assuming it's the majority of people have had a negative experience with this game.
I will go real briefly over to my Steam. Yeah, it has a mixed, out of 390 reviews, it came out on May 18th. It has a mixed, which is a little bit odd for Cyan. Yeah, one of the, let me see, most helpful review. Here's the most helpful review. It's a downvote. Most helpful review. I backed this game on Kickstarter a number of years ago. It was no longer on my radar, so I was delighted when it was released and I could return to the world of Cyan. As one would expect, the graphics and soundtrack are exceptional. The game itself, not so much. The landscape is empty with snippets of dialogue that tell you a wee bit of backstory. There is almost no lore, and few books, notes to find for clues. In the final moments, the story is revealed, and it seems like a letdown after hours of working through puzzles to traverse the various environments to reach the end location. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of negative stuff here.
Did it have a percentage of how much is positive/negative when you hovered over it?
It's... Alright, so 64% say positive. 64% still say positive. I mean,
64 is still a failing grade.
64 is a failing grade. I'm just sitting here like, if I were to look at Myst, and this would be the new Myst from 21, we're at like 88 all time. Do they have Riven? Can I look at the old-ass Riven? 87%. So yeah, there's definitely a disparity in how these have been perceived by the population at large. And I think it's mostly because for Cyan and people that like Cyan, it was the idea that they really crafted these worlds by hand, and that this was an endeavor, a labor of love of some sort. Like, in a more general sense, I just don't like the idea of AI being used for art. as a general rule, because I don't think it does a very good job of it. I don't know if you saw, somebody decided to use AI prompts to try and give the rest of the album cover, I use in quotation marks, for Abbey Road, where they were like, the cover for Abbey Road, the Beatles, where it's the four of them walking on the street, and it's just right up there. Well, they decided, we're going to use AI to show you the rest of Abbey Road. And it's got, like, a car from the 1990s over here. It's got a blimp in the sky. It's got all of this bullshit around it that that adds no context to the album or why they're on the street or anything else. And it's just a bunch of bullshit. And somebody made the very clear comment of, like, one of the things that art does, and artists have to do, is decide when they are not going to add more in there. Framing and where you stop framing it is very important. And one of the problems with AI art is that they always think more is better. And so it's the reason why it always feels so soulless, is because sometimes that framing and that closeness of the framing and how you present it is the point. And AI art always tries to make as much as it possibly can and generate it out until the whole point of the subject is, like, gone. I saw this other thing that everyone was like, just please stop, where they tried, it's a project to try and widen the old Letterbox movies using AI generation so that we get the rest of the scene from the top and the bottom, so it's not as because AI can make it better by adding, like, an inch above the screen and below the screen. They did it for the opening scene of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and you're watching it as they, like, phase out, and then they go and look at what AI generated on the top and bottom, and, like, how'd that add anything at all to this scene whatsoever?
I think what would be cooler with that, personally, is, because I'm a fan of the uncanny and the creepy.
Yeah.
If we've talked about that before.
Sure.
Like, I don't like straight up horror, but I like kind of creepy, like, unsettling things are really fun. I think it'd be fun if you took something like that and was like, take the letterbox and draw it back, and then it's just something, like, that you don't expect.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be just AI stuff. It could be tailored, but you could tell someone it's AI, be like, yeah, the AI generated this. And be like, just, like, have a Cthulhu or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Poking out at you or something like that. I feel like you could use it to that effect, and it would be interesting.
I would, you know what I'd love to see? I'd love to see it, is if they said, hey, I know that these movies were classics, but you know what we could do? I'm just going to have the AI make a whole new version of it, and just have them make Good, Bad, and Ugly. Like, do that. Or just, hey, can the AI make Star Wars? I want a new Star Wars movie. And just let them do it. Let them do it. Let them try to release it. And just watch. Just watch as everybody that complained about, like, the story didn't make sense in this last Star Wars movie. Let them watch that and see how it works. It's like, it's gonna make zero sense at all. And you're gonna realize why we did it the way we did it before. There's a reason for it. But I thought that observation about how art is not just about creating more, it's also about knowing the scope and the canvas that you're working on. And that AI will always try to generate more. So if I try to create the White Album, right, it's not just the White Album. It's going to be the White Album as this little tiny square in this giant sea of bullshit because the AI generated all of this other crap around the white square that was the album cover.
This should be a good takeaway from game companies.
Yes.
That AI can be a helpful tool to do things.
Yeah.
If what you're doing does not require a personal touch.
Those narrative games of any kind really needs to be able to have a person at the helm that can drive a narrative forward and can make a curated experience. And AI really is not built for that component. I think one of the components that happened here was that, this was kickstarted.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of people that had a financial investment in it beforehand that might not have been aware, apparently, that this was the way they were going to generate the games, and if they do it in the future, I think that's going to be a good lesson for them. Editor Nathan here, and we have an update. So the Kotaku article actually pulled this from Kickstarter, but Cyan has given a second, more detailed statement on what they mean by AI-assisted content, and I think it does help clarify, but I don't necessarily know if I feel any better about it. But I'm just going to go over it for the sake of completion. As many of you have seen or noticed, our credits in Firmament mention AI-assisted content. This has been present in the credits for Firmament since release day, and we have never hidden this information. AI-assisted does not wholly mean AI-generated. Unfortunately, there have been articles published recently that have implied, especially in their headlines, that Cyan generated much of Firmament using AI tools. This is categorically false and misleading, and we are disappointed and frustrated to see this happen. They clarify a couple things, like the voice performances in Firmament were voiced 100% of the time by a talented member of our development team who elected not to be credited by name. Their voice was modulated for the final product with one of these tools, and with their full permission and control. The thing that I think is really weird is, why did you need AI to generate the difference? Again, if it was that different, why didn't you have more voice actors? But anyway, the same member of the development team has elected not to be credited in prior games of ours as well for privacy concerns, and not anything to do with tool usage in our game. Okay, fine. Additionally, our narrative team elected to use AI writing tools to ideate and experiment with how information they wrote themselves is presented in the game. The artists who used AI tools to assist in the creation of assets, itemized above as well as in the credits, used them solely to ideate on texture assets for very specific scenarios. Other than the small handful of textural assets described, no AI tools were used in any aspect of Cyan's world building or art creation efforts. They go on to say that they have a talented team of individuals, all humans, good to know, with a breadth of experience, and they are disappointed to see that the contribution of those staff members was minimized and overshadowed by egregious speculation. Well, the speculation came from you having a thing that said AI-assisted tools, and then listing a ton of different things that had AI tools used for them. That's where the speculation came from. For those who are disappointed in our use of these tools, we hope you have a better picture now of how we use them to assist in Firmament's development. To our disappointed Kickstarter backers, we hope you understand that none of these tools even existed when we kickstarted the development of the project, but understand why you may be disappointed that we did not disclose our usage of them in the last year. These tools land in a gray area for many, but we hope that some accurate context, instead of a spicy headline, helps clarify this for you. First of all, just want to say that if Cyan had just released this to start with, or had been upfront with their Kickstart backers to begin with when they started using these, knowing that it was this kind of a thing, there probably wouldn't be headlines like this coming out now. Second of all, I can understand the idea that you want to ideate, and maybe you think AI generation will be able to ideate faster. That's understandable, but understand the response that you got back, Cyan, and understand the negative response that you got back from this, and understand that when people complain about something like this isn't up to the standards that we're used to when it comes to the story and the dialogue and stuff like that, that maybe it's because we're ideating off of the AI. I'm spitballing here because obviously we don't know, but I'm still thinking that the AI tools, considering that they got used here and not in previous games, even though they weren't in charge of the game, did not produce very good results by the metric of the people playing the game. I think the takeaway should probably be, maybe don't do this in the future. And again, like, I do a lot of editing myself. I don't understand why you needed to use AI tools to modulate pitch and timbre. It seems unnecessary, but they're saying that it wasn't nearly as egregious. It's not like the AI just made the whole game. They used it for ideation. They used some of the tools in the suite to help with some of the textures and stuff. Fine. But still, you saw the result. Editor Nathan out. Enjoy the rest of the segment.
Nathan, I don't know how you can get a hold of it, but maybe we should run one of our episodes through an AI editing process.
We should run it through an AI editing process, and then you'll see, oh wow, save Nathan a whole lot of time.
Yeah, and wow, the quality just went up.
Yeah, it went up so much. In fact, I'm going to run us through an AI program, and we'll get metahumans, and then I'll just have us talk about, I'll just put little topic into the thing, say, talk about game bad, and then just like sit there and just have the AI generate.
That'd be a fun experiment if
podcast.
It probably didn't cost hundreds of dollars to get access to the AI to do that. So
yeah, it is. But if we ever get a chance to, folks, we'll run an experiment.
Maybe. We'll see what we can do.
Maybe.
Anyways.
I'd like to try and put myself into MetaHuman at some point, though. What do any of you think out there? AI, bad or really bad? Those are your options.
Or did you play Firmament? Did you think it was flat and soulless, or did you think it was a good game?
Did you think Firmament was a good game? And if you did, why? I'm curious. And also, do you think it would be better if it was not AI assisted? Alex, you got a topic for me this time, don't you?
I do. I was thinking about campaign starters.
Okay.
Or ways to start games. And I had a thought of an interesting opener for a game.
Okay.
And I wanted your input, and maybe we could flesh this out a little bit as a creative exercise. People seem to like it when we've done something before with that.
We're doing theater of the mind.
Yeah, theater of the mind. We're doing improv right now.
As I call it, my mind palace. Let's go to the mind palace.
Great. Thank you, Monk. Doesn't matter what you do with the characters or who they are, but you could do a thing where the characters and the players all start. In the beginning of the game is they're coming back from an adventure.
Yep.
Maybe you've actually played this adventure out in-game beforehand, and this is the start to a new one. Maybe this is a fresh cold open. Hey, you guys have been out of town for a while, you were on this adventure or did this thing, and you just are coming back after being away for months or a year or some not insignificant amount of time.
Sure.
Back to your home. So you come back, and it turns out while you were gone, somebody was living your life. So you come back, and your family goes, "What are you doing? I thought you just ran to the store. I thought you were just left yesterday. You went out to go to the other town for a day and said you'd be back soon." And you're like, "I just came back. Sorry, I've been gone 2 years." And your family's just like, "No, you've been here the whole time.
You've been body snatched."
Yeah, body snatched, doppelganged.
You've been the doppelganged.
And so I thought it would be an interesting hook.
Yeah.
At the beginning, because suddenly you come back to this family who thinks you've been here the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's like, that's not right. Do I have a twin? Do I have an evil twin? You can talk about it, what were they doing? Were they just, we were just living a normal life. So obviously your family now thinks you're an imposter.
So, does the whole party experience this?
I think it would be fun if the whole party experienced it.
The whole party apparently came back early. Or they came back a month before you got there. And everybody just assumed. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe right after you left, a week later, you're like, "Hey, we're all here." This could be an elaborate plot from an enemy you've made on your last adventure, perhaps.
Sure.
It could be any kind of thing. Could just be something in the town. Could be body snatchers, doppelgangers. But it's alright, so either you need to figure out what you've done, if it's a whole party especially, what you've done to get your lives impersonated.
Sure.
Or what's the reason behind this? Maybe there's some great conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps maybe it's just doppelgangers. There's a range of things here that go from, depending what your party is interested in and the players are interested in,
Sure.
between being a very simple explanation to being a very elaborate and complex explanation.
Yes. There's the simple one of just like bunch of thieves were trying to, take your lives or, something like that, to the very complex one, which I'm sure we'll eventually get into.
Well, I'm
right
thinking
here.
the simplest would be some kind of illusion or enchantment magic.
Okay.
Somebody has come into town and is impersonating you through an illusion, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
or is enchanting people to make them think that you are them.
Got it. Maybe so that you can get access to places that they normally couldn't, or get
Sure.
information that they couldn't.
And it might work really well, perhaps, if one of the players is a noble, for
Sure.
instance, or a member of a holy order, or something that would make sense for them to want to infiltrate. But it could do that with anyone just to take over their life and live a simple life, maybe.
Right. The enemy would have to be aware of your comings and goings. They'd have to be aware that you were an adventurer and you were out of town. So
Right.
they'd have to have some previous knowledge, which might help you a little bit figuring out what's going on. But,
Sure. So
okay.
I feel like that's a simple explanation. Somebody's come in, they're using magic to impersonate you or make people think that they are you. That's a fairly simple explanation for this. And there's a lot you can do with it too. But we can get more complex.
Oh, yes. There are levels below this.
You can have an actual doppelganger.
Yes.
There are monsters in the monster manual, and most games have shapeshifters that can take on forms.
Changeling shape.
You could have somebody, changeling. You could have somebody that is actually a monster that actually takes your form, is impersonating you for some ill-gotten gain.
We're building Hush for Batman. We're building Batman's version of Hush.
Right.
Okay.
So that's a little bit more complex. You have to, how do you get rid of a shape changer? How do you deal with this monster, even though everyone in town thinks they're you? You can't just outright kill them, because they'll be like, oh, they'll become hostile.
Right.
Right. Suddenly that's an issue.
The other one that we've talked about on the show before, but it could be a false Hydra situation.
Sure. It could be something like that. Compulsion effects. Maybe
the thing that's really confusing to you is that you go in and everybody recognizes this other person, but it doesn't look anything like you because the psychic magic that the false Hydra has just makes everybody recognize them as you.
You seeing it is like, that's disgusting. Could be some sort of fungus or spores or something in the area, or infected water of some sort.
Ooh. Maybe it's a fungus person.
Could be.
That would be fun. Here's one of the interesting things that might be going on is that it had something to do with the place that you went. You could start researching and see if anybody else had actually gone into that forest. Maybe it is like a fungal forest or something like that. And there's this tendency where as you go into this place, you imprint yourself on the forest, and they can create a version of you, like stored into memory of sorts.
Sure. And then what would happen is maybe they birth a version of you that is a fungus, essentially, but looks like you and acts like you and has the memories of you, and you're like, wait, what am I doing? I have amnesia. I guess I should just go home.
Right.
Kind of deal, maybe.
And maybe,
something like that.
Yeah. Maybe it was an accident that you ever got out of that forest. You ever got out of that dungeon. Because most people don't. Like the idea is that you would fall asleep, like the spores make you fall asleep, and then you never wake up. And then the spores use your information to build a new version so that it can go out into the world.
And spread its spores.
And spread its spores and start a new den.
Sure. That's almost a false Hydra situation, but with a fungus monster. Yeah,
with a fungus monster that can actually create clones of you. So the fun thing about that is that you think you've been gone for like a month. Turns out you were not gone a month. You were gone years.
Jeez.
And people didn't know. And so now they've established this, and for all you know, in the city, they've been starting to create like their own fungal like forest in the sewers or in the swales underneath the city to create a new colony because they finally found one But they actually, since you've imprinted on them, they have your memories. They know who you are. They know like your personality. They're virtually indistinguishable from you, to the point that most people would not recognize who the real one is. And as far as they're concerned, now you are actually on the back foot, because there's been this like there's been years of new information. That fungus version of you, that mushroom you, has now had experiences that were much more recent and knows more about the town than you do, because you've been away without realizing it. And so now you actually are less of who you are than the person that has replaced you.
Right. Although I feel like a fungus or plant version of you would lack certain emotional depth.
It's possible. It's possible. But it doesn't, like, it might not be necessarily a plant or a mushroom as an organic life form, but I'm just kind of trying to create more of an analog of what that might be. Like, you think about as something spore-based. But it could be some kind of xenomorphic life form that only exists because it can mimic another creature. It can build versions of creatures that it has been exposed to.
Yeah.
That it's then able to go out and propagate. And so its motivation then is really clear at that point, because its motivation is it needs to propagate. It needs to be able to create these dens, these habitats, so that they can spread. And so I guess that's why I think about it like in mushroom form. But it doesn't have to be a mushroom. It could be a completely new life form that you're not aware of. That maybe because sentient life forms are what it likes to take on, actually does have a sentience of its own. Does have a bit more of a soul. It's now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of funny that we're talking about this right after we talked about AI. Isn't it? where we have something that is not alive trying to mimic the actions of people that are alive and do have, brain power. But if the AI, for instance, was an actual organism, you actually had an AI that was essentially an organism. So it's not really an artificial life form, but it is a xenomorphic life form of some kind that you don't really necessarily understand. They can copy whatever they encounter once it steps on essentially the floor of their house. And so they take a couple different forms. They have the one form, which is essentially the spread, the profligation of their environment, and then the ones that are essentially like the clone people, the pod people. Crab people. And they go out into the world so that they can then, perchance, create a new environment that they can go on. I was in my mind palace. I was having a mind moment. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I like the idea of having essentially like an AI, but it's not actually an AI. It's a creature of some kind that can take information that it gets and can mimic it, can build a version of it, like 3D print a version of you with all of the same memories and, information, your knowledge, everything like that. Go out into the world, but then with the specific agenda that it needs to continually build and propagate itself in new areas.
Yeah.
That would be the larger thing, because then that's a mystery for you. You have to figure out, your team has to figure out what this creature is, who these people are that have replaced you, who else went there, if they are here, again, if there's a marker that tells them what, if they're specifically, resistant, or if they're weak to some kind of damage that you aren't necessarily, used to. Basically, at this point, you know what we're doing, which
witch
is
hunting.
Just, well, no. Hopefully, we're not doing witch hunting.
Sniffing for truffles.
We're sniffing for truffles. No. We're doing that scene from The Thing, Remember the scene from The
No.
Thing with the blood test?
Nope.
You don't?
Didn't see it.
Oh. Okay. You should watch The Thing. I think it would give you an idea for this, but The Thing was an organism that could take over people's bodies, and then it became, like, it became them, right? But you couldn't tell who the thing was, or who had been taken over by it.
Yeah.
But there was a test that they could use, where if they got a vial of your blood, it was reactive to fire. So if they had your blood in the petri dish, and they put the fire to it, and it, like, exploded, then you knew that person was a thing, was one of the things. And that gave the game away.
I feel like it'd be easier just to light a match and have people put their fingers on it.
Yeah, but it's the blood specifically.
Oh.
Like, the blood specifically. But the fear that comes from that particular movie is the not knowing who are the good guys and bad guys. But if you had a test that you could run, you'd have the fun part of, like, trying to figure out who the creature is and who is not.
Oh yeah,
the
the creature can't get shot by an arrow.
Well, yeah, but it's got to be something that you don't get killed by.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So that's a lot about that. I think that's fun. I had another idea for another complex version that we don't have to go as in depth with, of course. But
Okay.
Maybe it really is you that's been back in town. Maybe either you've done something where you've hopped dimensions or time traveled.
Right. And you're seeing a copy of yourself.
So you have to either figure out if this is a version of you from the past, if this is actually you, or you hop dimension, something spatial and time anomaly. Those are things I enjoy. There could be a lot of things to do with that as well. We don't need to get into those entirely, but I thought the premise of you coming back from an adventure to find out that someone has been living your life for a not insubstantial amount of time would be interesting.
Yes. And I feel like it's been talked about in different kinds of mediums and forms in some way or another, but I don't see it very much when it comes to, like, the RPG space, where we're doing this as a tabletop role-playing experience. Here's one question, though, that I have, because we can look at it from space or time or dimensions or multi-dimensions or doppelgangers, body horror, whatever way you want. But the question that I then have is, from a role-playing standpoint, is what do you do to actually inhabit the player characters as essentially the NPCs that are their versions of it? Like, you've got me, and I've got my character, and I voice my character, and I act as my character, but now there's an NPC version, and you're going to be running it. Would you expect that the players, once they understand that that is a version of them and you have notes, would they actually play or mimic that person as well? Would they actually be the character and end the doppelganger? There's a question for you.
There's, I think, a question for other people, maybe.
That might be a question for other people. I'm kind of interested in it, like, from a narrative standpoint, because it's a mystery that they need to solve, but at the same time, it's essentially their character. So now does the NPC still get voiced by the GM, or is the player now in charge of them? And are there rules that they then have to follow where you can tell them something about it? Those
Among Us.
Is it Among Us? Did we just make Among Us as a TTRPG?
Maybe.
Scary. Don't
Great.
do that. Anyway.
Now we need to scrap this whole episode.
Scrap the whole episode. Back to the drawing board. Anyway, folks, if you have an idea about how you would deal with that, not just in scenarios, but also how you think you can deal with that in terms of the, like, GM player interaction when it comes to, like, the doppelganger scenario, let us know in the comments down below. We got one more thing to do here. and that is to talk a little bit about this Reddit post that I saw. You might know that a little while ago we did, I think, a Saturday special, and it was about the idea of your party owning and operating like a bar or a tavern or a shop, a magic shop, the odds and ends magic shop, and organizing a campaign basically around making the business work.
Right.
And so it was funny for me because I saw this and it reminded me of it, but under like needing advice. So my players heard about how in some campaigns DMs let players own real estate, so they have in their heads to buy a bar in Waterdeep. Granted, they don't think they have the money, so they are currently planning a bank heist. Of course they are. My question is, how much does a bar cost, and what are the mechanics for upkeep and such?
I feel like those are in the rule book.
I think they are. It's actually one of the comments down below. If you have access to Waterdeep Dragon Heist, there's a big chunk about the party getting a bar and inn. I think that there are some rules in that supplement that talks a little bit about that. I was always a little confused, though, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, is that in a lot of these games, the amount of money that you are getting and using for your adventurers seems completely disproportionate from the economy at large.
Yes, very.
Like, your greatsword could buy, like, a mansion. Like, in a lot of it.
Maybe not a mansion, but, you know, if you look at how much people earn, like, a laborer earns per day.
Yeah.
In D&D's economic breakdown, it's not a whole lot.
No.
And so you with 100 gold, basically you come in and you go give someone a gold on the table and you've paid their monthly salary.
Yeah.
You know, essentially. Because they're like, oh, we make a couple silver a day. And it's like, oh, I just made 3,000 gold killing this goblin.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Domestic life means nothing to me now.
So it's like, I've got 10,000 gold. I'm walking into this town, and they're like, you can buy the whole town and everyone in it.
Yeah, it's not going to be very difficult to buy a shop or something else.
Especially in smaller towns. I imagine maybe in a big city that's a huge center of metropolis with a lot of people and merchants and stuff. That might be a little pricier, but even still. If you've got thousands of gold, tens of thousands of gold.
Right.
Waterdeep is not going to be an issue. You can buy a bar in Waterdeep.
Absolutely. I remember when I was playing 1879, and I was an inventor. Like, that was, I was technically a weird scientist, but, you know, what I did was I made little gadgets and stuff, and put magic inside of them, essentially, and threw them out into the world. And so, after we went on this adventure in South America to, like, the Aztec step pyramids and stuff, we get back, and I get paid my stipend and everything, and for the time period, what I've gotten paid for that is and not an inconsiderable sum. Like, I've been given something like what amounts to like 30, 40, 50 pounds, which, you know, in, you know, 1800s money is pretty impressive for even the time that I've been away. And I think to myself, well, hey, you know, I need a place where I can actually build this stuff and maybe make actual schematics and stuff, and I'm gonna see if I can buy a shop in London. And so Andy basically was like, yeah, we'll try to figure this out. But yeah, I was able to use essentially money that I got not just to buy a shop in London, but also to hire a few laborers that would be able to do some of the basic work, and also to have a mass of scrap that would be delivered to me that I'd be able to utilize for a lot of the creations, and that would pretty much cover me for like 3 or 4 months. Like, I could pretty much rent this place out and have all of this for 3 or 4 months. And my plan was eventually like, well, if I can do production and I have people that can work on stuff while I'm away, and I have designs that would be interested to everybody else, which I think my what was it? My portable tureen that I created, like
Yeah.
like a camp tureen or whatever for cooking. If I could create those and I could sell those, you know, on the market, it would pretty much pay for itself. But I could just upkeep it with passive income. I was creating a passive income simulator inside of my game. But the fun part about that is that there is something very neat about being able to own a home, own a bar, own something, because adventurers, by and large, make a ton of cash relative to the economy.
And the thing is, you want to give, in that sense, players want something to spend that money on.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, especially for like 5e D&D, there's not a lot to spend your gold on in large sums, because it's not a super magic weapon heavy system, and they're harder to find.
Yeah.
And even so, when you've got 30,000 gold, it's like, yeah, I have all the weapons and armor I need.
Right.
It's like,
what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with that money? So it's like finding something that players are willing to sink money into and is important to them, and then you could use as a story beat later. Like perhaps you buy a house, perhaps you pull the Skyrim and you go to Falkreath and get that house out in the Reach. You know?
Yeah. You Hearthstone, right? Or not Hearthstone. God, I can't remember what it's called, but that expansion where you can build your house. Hearthfire. There we go. I was half right.
So perhaps you buy your house out in Falkreath, and then bandits attack because there's this house there in the middle of nowhere. It's like, cool. This looks like a nice place. Let's ransack it. So now you've got to defend your home. So in the same thing with like D&D or any RPG, if you give players something to be invested in and are monetarily invested in, they're going to defend it tooth and nail.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like the idea of, like, I don't necessarily think that I would build something out in the sticks or build a house out in the sticks, but I do like the idea, especially if you are a rogue or anything like that, of building or buying a place that's, like, in the city. Like, I keep thinking back to, like, Fable. Because in Fable, there would be this whole thing where buildings could come up for sale if there was no owner, and you could buy... You could eventually buy, like, the whole town in Fable 2 and 3.
And then you would make rent.
You would rent out a bunch of places. But I thought what would be really interesting is if you were, like, a thief or something like that, and you get to a town, and you're like, I'm going to set up operations here, and they don't have, like, a thieves guild. Why not just build a thieves guild? And then I'll get a place, and then I'll spend money on renovations on the DL to make, like, a catacombs underneath, so that I can build, like, essentially like the Riften Sewers thieves guild underneath the building, and have a front, or have a storefront of some kind that I'd be able to use. Ooh, where you could pawn the stuff that you steal. Yeah, that would be fun. But for any kind of character class that seems like it would work, you would imagine that if you can just buy a place and then you could renovate it out, or, you know, build in your secret stashes or your secret places. If you have, like, holy relics and you need a place to store them, you could build essentially like your Ghostbusters kind of scenario where you know, I can actually take the time, set down roots so that I can build my, you know, tank so that I can keep all the spirits of my enemies or whatever in there, whatever you're doing. I would think about doing stuff like that, or buy a shop front so that maybe I can actually pawn off some of the random knickknacks that I came across on my journey.
I feel like what you should do as players is, instead of buying a property, you should take and clear out an old dungeon or a tower or something like that full of monsters. Clear it out entirely and then call it your own. Just be like, yeah, we claim this.
Yeah,
I don't see why you can't. Who owns it? Nobody. Monsters have infested it. It's ours now.
Hey, you remember when we dealt with those were-rats? We should have just taken that silver mine.
It was a gold mine.
It was a gold mine? Oh, that's right. It was a gold mine. That's right.
I mean, somebody else already actually owned that.
Oh, yeah. Damn it. Oh, but you know what? But the ruins. We came across those ruins that were just...
Kill all the orcs.
Yeah. That had like a shrine and stuff in it. That was kind of cool.
You could have been like, we're gonna invest money to fix this place up.
Imagine if I had like 100 gold, right? and I say I want to fix up this old shrine. 100 gold, if I need to hire some construction folks and get some materials together and, utilize it, that's going to take me pretty far. I can fix up a lot of this.
Yeah, I think the quest would then take you on how do you find the Masons Guild and how do you hire them out?
That's what you would have to do after that. But, I mean, I keep thinking like that, especially if you find something where it seems like it's a significant location, you might want to utilize it to some degree, especially if you end up with like horses. Where are you going to stable the horses, right?
Yeah.
You kind of need a place at some point where you can keep them, or chests for all of the random stuff. If you care about weight requirements, then you're probably going to need to think about like, how am I going to store all this extra stuff? There was like a big ass gold bell that we had to take. That ain't light.
No.
You got to figure out where you're going to store this stuff until you can actually do it. So, I don't know. Here's encouraging folks to just take over old abandoned shrines and temples.
And just spend your money on things that can return profit.
Yeah. This is a great repurposing for dungeons. Can you imagine? I like this idea. Imagine if you were a real estate agent in like the world of Faerun, and you're like going up to like these like Ankeg nests or these dark dank sewers or wherever, and you're kind of like going, okay, so look, it's a bit of a fixer-upper, but I can tell you that you have water on demand right there. It's running right through. The stonework is fantastic here. Really old, very ancient. There's a summoning circle.
I think it'd be more fun to sell it to the monsters.
Yeah, sell it to the monsters.
It's like, look, if you don't take this, I got a group of orcs who are willing to move in tomorrow.
We had another set of buyers, but they already fell into all of the traps. So the traps are already disarmed, okay? We're not even going to charge you for that. The trap disarming service, free. We're going to toss that in. Going back to the basic question was just, how much does a bar cost? Probably not enough to make it, like, a realistic system in the game. But then again, if you're a treasure hunter in the real world and you're successful at it, if you were actually successful at it as a treasure hunter, you could probably afford a bar. Page 128 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Here we go. Building a stronghold. Yeah, okay, trading post. Okay, keep outpost. Intriguingly enough, none of these really mention anything about a bar or a tavern, which you would think would be like, maybe the guild hall would count. You could like repurpose a guild hall, and it's like 5,000 and it's 60-day construction.
These aren't even great prices.
No.
I feel like you could do better.
Yeah.
I think at one point in time I wanted to do something like this, but better, where the campaign was like building an outpost on a new frontier, essentially.
You only need
where it's like you just build a town.
Yeah.
But you have to gather materials. But that would be a completely different campaign at that point. That'd be like, you're not just adventurers, you are like artisans and town builders. And it would be more a strategic game than an RPG at that point, and I don't know if people would want that.
Yeah. I love the fact that I can buy an abbey for 50,000 gold.
Right?
I love that I can buy a palace, a large castle or a palace you can buy for 500,000. That's the most expensive one. So I'm thinking, here's what you do. Great idea for a campaign if you care about economics, is you actually set up and build a town from scratch. And you basically have a whole, like, maybe like 1 million gold is what you can spend on this. But you can't obviously put it all in at one time. But there's itemized things that you can buy.
That sounds a lot. That's kind of why I didn't do this, is because it becomes a lot of how much do all the materials I need cost? Am I buying them? Or it's like, well, if you're setting up a new frontier, you're probably only shipping over a few materials to set up a few basic places, and then the first thing you're building is a sawmill.
Right. Which then speeds up your time frame for anything else.
And then you're deforesting, and I thought about this a bunch. I did look into like things, and I was like, oh, there are different types of building you can do. There's like beam and stone beam, and there's wooden
Post
beam,
I'm
and then
sure,
there's
yeah.
post and beam, and then there's balloon frame, which is apparently the type of framing we now currently use in most houses, is a balloon frame.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's a lot here, and I'm like, this is a lot of research.
Yeah.
So I did look into that, clearly.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of building the frontier town, though, like out there.
I think
on the
it's
outskirts.
definitely, I still like the idea, because honestly, it'd be like, cool, you're in the, like, you're on a beachfront, you're gonna go in a bit, you're gonna take apart the boat, maybe, probably not take apart the boat,
Right.
but you're gonna be like, all right, we've got our supplies for like 2 months, we're gonna build this little outpost here, you guys come back in a month.
Yep.
And the first thing you're doing is clearing out, killing monsters, like identifying plants. You're explorers, but you're also like building this town.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting. I think there are not a lot of rules to support helping that, because like you'd have cost of material, a type of material you need. You'd have a stone cost, a wood cost for buildings, or clay, if depending. You'd have different types of resources. So you'd have resource management, town building, and an RPG.
Right.
Which
exactly.
some players would be into, some players would not be, and balancing out how you do the sessions would be interesting. Are we playing the RPG or are we town building today?
Right. I think in similar fashion, I think when we were talking about the bar, I think we determined that like if you were running a tavern, maybe there were expansions to the tavern that would cost so much and might need certain resources in order to build them, and that by building that, there are new options available. Like you get something for it. You maybe you get bonuses to certain interactions that you would have, or certain characters that would show up. But then also that there's certain story hooks and beats that would unlock depending on what upgrades you had done. Like if you have like a gambling hall in the back of the tavern, it's going to attract a certain character that's going to come along and activate a quest line that you can go down. But would also potentially give you, maybe advantage on luck rolls that deal with like dice games and stuff like that. Like there'd be different things like that were piecemealed out by expansions to the main thing, to simplify it a little bit and to more or less focus back on the characters getting something out of it and the players, getting to advance the storyline.
Yeah.
I think you could do that. You just expand it out to a town too. But at any rate, if anyone's wondering, to get back to the actual question we were answering, apparently a bar is, I think you'd equate it to a guild hall, honestly, which is like 5,000, maybe call it 10 because you got permits and stuff you got to put in.
Sure.
Why not 10K? Call it.
Sure.
Doable. Oh, very doable. You can make that happen, no problem. Or rent it out. Maybe you can rent instead of buy. In this economy, you bet. Anyway, folks, if you have a better answer to how much a bar should cost, or a tavern, should we use them interchangeably? I don't know.
Pub. They're all the same thing.
A pub, a watering hole.
An establishment.
Yes, the Waterdeep watering hole.
Watering deep hole.
The deep hole. Just call it the deep hole. If any of you have some thoughts on what it should have actually cost, let us know. But I think the best I can tell you is it's probably around 10. Probably around 10.
Yeah.
Very doable. Surprised that more people don't bother to make that happen. What happens if you get back to the bar that you bought and a version of you is behind the counter serving at the bar?
Oh, well then you just keep them there because that's free labor.
That's true. You don't have to pay yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
I'm pretty sure there's a temporal labor law about that, but let's not go into that. Whatever. You'd have to determine what it actually was first, and you're not going to do that. Hey, you know what? My xenomorphic spore creatures could be really great for that. Just keep walking into the woods and creating multiple copies of yourself.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you got a whole staff. Anyway, so Alex, if folks would want more wonderful fantasy economic advice from us, where could they go?
You can go to totalpebbleknockdown.com where we have pages and pages of economic advice.
That's right.
We swear. They're hidden. You can't find them. But if you find them, let us know.
To everyone who listen, you can find our Patreon over on the website. You can rate and review and subscribe on all of the podcast apps that are known to mankind. And you can find us on social media. I am at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
So check us out there. And with that being said, we're going to go off and buy a fantasy bar and hopefully staff it with clones of ourselves.
Yes.
So, hey, why not do that? And it's totally going to be AI generated. So it's going to make no money whatsoever.
Perfect.
See, that's how you could have solved your problem when you built that. You just have the AI generate all the variables for you. And, yeah. They tried to build it out of crypto. Just build the bar out of cryptocurrency. It's good. It's good building material, folks. Anyway, bye, everyone.
Bye!